Hey guys, Jay here, and welcome back to another video. Guys, I'm super excited because today I'm going to be talking about my tier 2 bow wand healing build that I'm actually going to be going for. I know I spoke about a pure healing build in my last video, but this is one that I've been spending a lot of time on, a lot of different experimenting and a lot of or not really testing, but a lot of experimenting with the different gear pieces over on Questlog. And so I think I've landed on something that I'm actually proud of and actually something that I am going to be going for unless something better comes out or unless I experiment further and find something that's a little bit better. But honestly, guys, this is what I've come up with. I'm going to try to make this a quicker video than I normally do. And so you guys know I like to be as thorough and concise as possible. So I'm going to try to explain everything the best that I can. But really, guys, until we actually get into tier 2, we're not going to 100% know what the meta is. But honestly, I'm not too afraid of that. I think we're going to just make our own meta and we're going to figure it out along the way. Because, a lot of things from the KR server don't really translate as well into the global. And I think there are a lot more players that are going to be on the global when Talandri comes out. And so I think that's going to ultimately influence what our build is going to be based on what the global servers are doing. And so, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn from what's going on in KR as well. So I don't want to dismiss that at all. I'm just saying that, hey, as you guys are building this, I want to encourage you guys that our meta could be a little bit different. And so that's what I want to focus on today is kind of my build and what I think is going to be pretty strong going into tier 2. And so with that, guys, let's get right into it. So this is my triple coverage healer build. And this is, again, something that I'm going to be going for because I think it's going to be pretty solid going into tier 2. How I built this is I basically took a look at all of the different weapons, armor pieces, and other previous builds from a damage perspective. And I tried to figure out, okay, what is going to be really effective, going in for tier 2 for the DPS, like what are they going to be building? And honestly, it's going to be a lot of hit chance. It's going to be a lot of collision chance. It's going to be a lot of crit damage. Ultimately, it's just going to be a lot more damage, right? And a lot more damage from all three types, melee, ranged, and magic. And so basically for me, when I was thinking about this, I was like, well, I feel like the only way that we can really combat everything is to really combat everything. And so that's why I decided to go for a triple coverage build. Basically with this build, I tried to hit certain thresholds that I thought would be effective against all three, melee, ranged, and magic. And so that's kind of where I landed today. Basically with this build, I wanted to try to maximize my defenses while also being able to maximize my cooldown and healing capabilities. But realistically, this build is kind of more focused on survivability, but we're able to do massive heals if we're able to get this full build out. So guys, just to help you out, I'm going to be going through just one or two of these, but I made multiple versions of this build to kind of help you out. Basically, there are a lot of really good pieces of gear out there, and a lot of them are arc boss. And so I wanted to make a build that actually didn't have all arc boss gear and accessories. But I also wanted to show you guys what, if you could get all these arc boss gear pieces, what it would look like, or what it could potentially look like. Okay, so before I get into this again, I want to kind of iterate why or how I was able to land on my triple coverage build, what types of thresholds I was looking for, so that I can give you guys kind of the groundwork of why I chose what I chose. And so basically, as a pure healer, as a healer, bow wand healer specifically, we want to be able to survive all the damage that we can. And when I was looking at, okay, what's going to be the best between evasion and endurance, I decided to land on endurance. I think, guys, endurance is just going to be the move for us as bow wand healers because there's going to be so much critical hit damage coming in. And basically, endurance is always effective. So there's like, if for evasion, for example, if you have lower evasion than their hit chance, then your evasion essentially is kind of useless. Whereas if you have lower endurance, then that just reduces the chance of them hitting a crit on you, but it's just not as potent if you had more endurance than their hit chance, than their hit chance. And so basically with that, I wanted to mitigate as much critical hit damage as possible while also maintaining survivability from collision too. And so basically my biggest threats that I look at are really what are the biggest threats? And for me, it was collision, which comes from the tornado, and also from I think the greatsword has that one where it knocks you down. That's another collision one too. And then also flash wave, right? So that's a lot of range that's coming in. And then finally too, that spear is pretty strong right now. And who knows if that'll translate into tier 2, which I think it might. And so basically I want to be able to mitigate as much of those as possible. And I cannot forget about my magic users as well. As you guys know, getting hit by a fireball feels really bad. And so if we can get a lot of magic defense up there and endurance, that's what we're going to be focusing on. Okay, so I'm basically just giving you guys that breakdown because I wanted, that's kind of how I decided to build this. So going into the weapons, before I go into the weapons, I'm going to go over the stats, which I forgot last time. So the stats are really important, guys, because basically we want to hit certain stat thresholds to basically enable our defenses, our health, and our cooldown speed and all that fun stuff. So really when you're going through this build, I want you guys to always try to aim for 70 strength if possible, it's more than possible when you're making builds like this in tier 2 because the gear is just crazy. And as we're talking about the gear and things like that, guys, this is a final build. This is with the resonant effect. This is with the artifacts. This is with maxed out masteries. This is with maxed out skills, which, by the way, I got rid of the mastery for the skills here. So when you guys jump over on this, it won't inflate the skills and things like that, or it won't inflate the stats. And so, guys, this is like maxed out everything, right? So whether, this is going to be very challenging to get, but I wanted to show you guys the end game of what's possible. And so that's where I landed today. Okay, so with that, the stats are going to be very possible to get. Basically, we want to go for that 70 strength if possible. We want to go for 50 wisdom because I like the cooldown speed. And then all the gear ends up getting over 70 perception, which I like 70 perception. And the reason why is that feeds into our gear piece, which we'll talk about. And then I also like to go for 40 fortitude as well because we get extra endurance from 30. And then we also get magic defense from 200 there as well. Now, dexterity, you definitely can build into to get 30 if you want. So you can sacrifice one of these. Maybe I would sacrifice the cooldown speed to get some of the cooldown speed here, and then maybe even the fortitude just to get your dexterity up. But realistically, you could just sacrifice the wisdom there from your cooldown speed, and then you'd be able to hit this threshold if you want more crit. So again, with this, guys, this is very flex build. You can kind of do whatever you want to do with it, but this is where I landed. Okay, so talked about the stats briefly. Now we're going to get into the weapons. So the weapons, guys, pretty much no matter what, I'm going to be going with the Arc of Lunar Radiance and the Overture of Eternal Salvation. Guys, these two are just probably the best unless you can get the Cordy wand, which I also think is a really, really good wand for us too because it gives us a lot more cooldown speed. So I'm not going to really talk about these too much, guys. I've talked about them in previous videos, but just go for these two because these are just going to be the best for us. It's kind of like this is like our better Carnix bow, and then this is like an excavator wand, So this is pretty much what we want to go for are these two, and they're pretty easy to get. Easy. They're pretty farmable to get, I should say, through dungeons and things like that. So just go for those. And with that too, I'm going to talk about briefly like the rune effects and things like that. Not going to get too much in the weeds, but realistically, you want to go for, the crit damage reduction, extra strength, and then you want to get as much resistances as possible. This specific one, I have the whale without Cordy and then the whale with Cordy. The reason why I have this as a whale is because, the Cordy one is an arc boss. The belt, the Paladin's belt, is an arc boss as well. The necklace is a field boss on Nebula Island, and then this is also a field boss too. So these ones are very, very going to be very challenging to get, and also very expensive. And so that's why I call them. This is like my whale build. With that too, I'll just quickly talk in the description. I marked out everything, all of the build or pieces here, and then showing, hey, this is where you essentially will get it. And the accessories, guys, that's what's going to kill us. The accessories are just going to be super expensive, but thankfully I made a build that has no field boss, no arc boss. It's just purely dungeon dungeon build that you can farm pretty easily. Granted, some of it is on Nebula Island, which those are going to be challenging, but at least it's not a field boss or an arc boss on Nebula Island like the Paladin's belt. Okay, so with that, guys, let's go back to the equipment. So when I'm looking at the pieces of gear that I want, essentially, I really like the 2-piece set effects, and I like to get 2 of them. The reason why is because there's so many really good set effect bonuses that are coming into tier 2, and I wanted to take advantage of as many of them as I could while being effective, of course. So the reason why I decided to go with the Vanguard set, so I have the Vanguard 2-piece set, and then I also have the Oracle Priest 2-piece set. And there's a couple of reasons why. The first one is if we look right at the set effect, it says magic, melee, and range endurance is 45 per 10 perception. So basically every 10 perception we get an extra 45 endurance across all 3, which again, I'm going a triple coverage route. So I want to make sure I'm taking advantage of this as much as possible, which is why I'm beefing up my perception to get that. Plus we get all the extra hit chance, all that fun stuff too. And it increases our buff duration, which is really nice. So the reason why I decided to go with the helmet and the chest piece here is because we get fortitude, wisdom, max health, and collision resistance, which is huge. Because again, I was talking about that I want collision resistance going into tier 2 because there's going to be so much collision hit chance and hit chance in general. And so I want to be able to not get any airtime with that tornado. Okay, so basically I want to go for that. And then with that too, I decided to go for the cooldown speed route because I want as much cooldown speed on my healer as possible while being able to survive, which I'll talk about later. And so basically, this is kind of the set that I'm going to be going for. Again, we look at the Vanguard chest piece as well. We get fortitude, strength, damage reduction, range endurance, and then all of the traits are just awesome, right? And so again, guys, like I don't go for max health on these 2 because I'd rather go for the cooldown speed and I'd rather go for the debuff duration. Because realistically, guys, if you just look at the health that I have right now, I'm at 27k, which is more than enough. A good rule of thumb to follow as you're going into tier 2 is there should be really no excuse that you should not be getting above 20k. And that's just because of all the gear pieces that we have. And so anything like, 25k or higher, you're going to be totally fine with. I would rather get certain stat thresholds and not worry too much about getting 30k health when I can get more endurance, because endurance, debuff duration, collision resistance, that's going to pay more dividends than having an extra 1,000 health. And so just remember that as we're going into this too. Okay, so that's why I went for these 2. I get that sweet set effect bonus, which is really nice. And then before I talk about the cape, I'll talk about my other set effect bonus too, which is the Oracle Priest set. So the reason why I went for this, right, is because we get that set effect bonus, which says melee, range, and magic defense increases by 200. And all of that goes by 200 for all of our parties within the 18-meter range. Now, this is a really cool thing because we basically just, give raw damage mitigation to our teammates from that defensive stat, which is just super nice to have. I mean, like having defense in general is just really good because it says it just decreases damage taken from these attacks, right? And if we're able to give that to our teammates, I mean, we're being the ultimate support, right? So this is one of the best ways we can do it. Now, I'll briefly talk about why there is another set that allows us to give 120 endurances to both ourselves and the rest of our team. Now, the reason why I didn't do this is because a couple of reasons. So let me see if I can pull it up real quick to make sure I am talking about the right one. I believe is it the skilled? Yeah. Okay. So as you guys can see, it says melee range and magic endurance increases by 120, and it gives it to our party members within that region, or excuse me, that area. The reason why I didn't go for this, one, is because a lot of the stats that we get from the skilled veteran set are just not as beneficial as the Vanguard. Yes, we give 120 endurance to the rest of our teammates, but we will benefit more from us surviving by giving us more endurance from the Vanguard set, as well as hitting different stat thresholds within our attributes too. So if I had the skilled veteran set, I wouldn't be able to hit the fortitude as effectively. And same with our strength and things like that. And plus, you can also just look that because I'm building into a lot of collision resistance, that is the reason why I'm going to be going for the Vanguard set over this. I'm okay with giving raw defensive stats from our Oracle, which is that 200 increase, but I'm not okay with giving endurance because not everyone's going to be building endurance all the time. And sometimes it's just, yeah, 120 is kind of nice, but say someone's like a crossbow dagger and they're not going to be building any endurance. I mean, is really 120 endurance if they already have like 50? Is that really going to do a whole lot? I don't think so personally. I think we get more value from protecting ourselves with one of these sets and then protecting our teammates with another one of these sets, which inevitably protects ourselves too. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about that real quick of why I chose this set over the other one. Okay, now with that, right, we get so many good stats from our Oracle preset, and we get the defenses here, mana cost efficiency dex, great, max health, awesome, critical hit chance, great for crit healing and things like that. So that's why I ended up going for this. Again, go for those endurances, and then I also go for the buff duration as well because that just increases our overall effectiveness. The boots too, guys. You know, we get movement speed, which is awesome. We don't want to be super slow, but then we get perception, max health, heavy attack chance, which all influence our survivability and our ability to heal stronger. And so, guys, I just go for this. Yeah, you could switch out the max mana for more movement speed if you want to be a little bit quicker. But I decided to go max mana because it just increases our healing threshold and then also our cooldown speed too, which is really nice. Okay, so now that I talked about that, that's my main four pieces of armor, which are each a 2-set bonus, which is nice. Going into the cape, guys, I think this is just going to be the best one for us if you're going to be building into collision. Collision is just really nice. Plus, we get the mana cost efficiency, which is awesome. And so I just like building collision resistance, guys. There's so much you can do with it, and being on the ground is just awesome. I don't like flying with tornadoes. I don't like, being unable to heal my teammates. So this is just going to be really helpful, and we get a lot of good stuff too. So this is a very defensive cape. Next is going to be the Redfin Arthropod gloves. So again, guys, to me, this is like a no-brainer one because we get range, which affects our healing. We get mana cost efficiency, perception, wisdom, and then we get all these different endurances, which is just really nice. And again, this is a pretty easy, I believe it's in a dungeon that we can get. Yeah, the Redfin glove is in a dungeon. So basically, this should be pretty farmable to get. And honestly, like I have this in the whale build as well. I'm sure there's a better one that you can find that has nothing to do with that, but I really liked the perception and the wisdom. Okay, so now let's move into the necklace, which is the Moon and Shadow necklace. Guys, again, this is going to be a pretty tough one to get. If we look into the, accessories here, it's on Nebula Island, which makes it challenging, and then it's a field boss, which is even more challenging. So I recognize that, and we'll talk about my end game with no arc boss, and then also briefly talk about a no field boss one as well. But I wanted to show you guys, hey, this is what you could possibly do if you're able to get all these cool items. Okay, so the reason why I want to go for this, cooldown speed, perception, wisdom, and then ultimately that's skill damage resistance. Guys, skill damage resistance is going to be absolutely huge going into tier 2. So if you can build as much skill damage resistance as possible, it's going to serve you really well because it's just raw damage mitigation, which is just awesome. And then plus, the rune synergy effect, you guys can check all these out too. Basically, with this, again, with the whale set, I'm going to have a chaos rune on every single one because that helps me meet certain thresholds. But again, going into the end game one, I don't have any chaos runes to give you guys perspective. Okay, so that's the necklace, guys, really helpful. And then going into the bracers, this one to me was an awesome one because we get, yes, magic defense here, but then we also get range endurance, perception, melee endurance, max health. Just everything is really good on this. That gives us stat effects, gives us the stat attributes, and then it also gives us a lot of endurance, which I'm building into. And so I would go for this, guys. Now, the rune synergy effect kind of is funky on quest log. So it forced me to do shield block penetration chance, which is kind of weird. Whereas I think, if you're able to, get this in the actual game, which I'm sure I'm just messing up the combo. Basically what I'd want to do is I want to go for either the max health with added attack speed. That's what I would like to do. But because I switched these to different chaos runes and things like that, that's why, that's why it kind of changes out on me. So for example, if I switch this to a Chaos Rune, it just automatically switches. And so, I don't really know like what the deal is with that, but I just wanted to bring that up as like, maybe it's just a quest log thing and that's why it's kind of, messing up. But hey, is what it is. I just wanted to kind of talk about that real quick. If you're able to get this, great. But as we know, it's going to be very challenging to get all these Chaos Runes. So yeah, basically with that, we want to go for max health, skill damage, collision, debuff. All these great things are just awesome for our survivability. So with that, we're going to go into the rings now. So rings, guys, the Black Anvil is just going to be our best in slot no matter what build you're going. If you can get this ring, it's going to be awesome. Again, this is going to be a really challenging ring to get. Because this is a field boss. So again, it'll be pretty expensive, but it is really good. You get heavy attack, wisdom, perception, strength, which is great. And then again, with all these set effects, I get cooldown and strength, which is just awesome. And then finally, the ring, Cold Snap's ring. Again, this is going to be very, very hard to get because this is an arc boss ring. And so basically, if you guys haven't figured out, the accessories are just going to be the most challenging part of any of these builds. And I think that goes for all of the tier 2 builds. All of the accessories are just super expensive. So just know that. But the reason why this is the best, in my opinion, is because it gives heavy attack, movement, perception, but then we get more collision resistance, which is what we want. And we stack into that down here as well. So yeah, again, go for this if you can. If you can't, I totally understand. And then finally, the Paladin's Belt. Again, guys, look in the description here. The Paladin's Belt is not only is it a Nebula Island, but it's an arc boss, which makes it like even harder than a normal arc boss because the Nebula Island, from what I understand, you can only access it at certain times or whatever. And so basically that just makes it even harder to get. So if you guys can get this, more power to you. You get endurance, perception, damage reduction, max health, and then all these great things here. And it's just an awesome belt. Again, like it's going to be very challenging to get all these sets, right? Or all these pieces, but I wanted to showcase it. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the stats, and then I'm going to go into, I'm not going to really talk about the Cordy too much, but I'm going to talk about what my end game would be without all of these arc boss and very challenging ones to get. So if we look over here on my stats, guys, what I really want to pay attention to is everything that I have starred, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. My max health is awesome, guys. Again, if you can hit above 25k, I think you're pretty solid. Max mana, go for 10k if possible. If not, it's not the end of the world. And the reason why it's not the end of the world is because we have good mana regen, plus we have 35% mana cost efficiency, which is just crazy. I mean, like, you're going to be able to cast a lot of spells and not have to worry about your mana during sustained fights, which is really nice. Movement speed is solid. We can keep up with our team for the most part. They're going to be in the 20-30%, but at least we'll be able to keep up with them. Skill damage skill damage boost, respectable, right? Not amazing, but it gives us that 20% increase, which is nice. Now with this build specifically, again, as I talked to my previous build, if you can get anywhere from 30 to 50% cooldown speed, I think you're at a really good point. And I pulled up, this formula as well too, the cooldown speed over on Maxroll. Basically, as we can see, if we get a cooldown speed of 30%, then we're at a 23. And if we go to 40, then we're at 28, and then 50. That's where we get, like, as you can see, it goes in increments of about 5%, and then it's goes about 6% here too as well. So if you can get 30 to 60%, I'll just throw a random range out, then you're going to be looking pretty good. I always try to aim for anywhere from 40 to 50% if possible, without sacrificing too much survivability. But if you want more cooldown speed, more power to you, do it. And so basically for me, I'm going to go for, or for me, I have almost 45%, which gives us that 31% actual damage reduction, which I think is just really solid. So if you guys can go for that, go for higher if possible, but don't sacrifice too much survivability for cooldown speed, in my opinion. Skill heal, honestly respectable. We have 85%, which is just really solid. And then plus, like, again, on quest log, it's a little bit different than real time in game. When you're casting your abilities, you will get more based on your passives and things like that. So just note that. So we'll end up being over 100% as we're actively casting spells. Buff duration, huge, like 63%, almost 40% actual increase to our buffs is just insane. I think this is really solid. Anything above 50% buff duration is going to serve you pretty well. And so I think you should go for that. Plus, with that, we have the debuff duration. I have mine at 30%. There's a very specific reason why I have that at 30%. And if we go to this calculator again, right here, 30% is kind of where we hit the really diminished return. Not really diminished, but you don't want to go anywhere higher than 34%. But essentially, 30% gives you a 25% raw debuff duration, which 25% I think is insane. And that's a 5% from 24% buff duration to 30%. So there's a very specific reason why I do these things, guys. I don't just like randomly throw numbers out and then that's what we're going for. Go for that 30% of debuff if possible so that you can get 25%. If you can get 34%, more power to you again, but you can see like it goes 4% difference here and then a 5% difference here as well. So, and then 3% as you get higher. So that's why I go for 30% there. Okay, now moving into collision resistance. Guys, this is huge. Absolutely huge. You guys needed to put collision resistance into your builds if you can. I go for 1200. 1200 is, it sounds like a very random number, but I want to take you guys over to, where did I put it? Okay, here it is. So this is over in quest log, guys. This is our CC chance and things like that. Essentially, this is kind of, based on what we're trying to defend against. Really, we're trying to defend against tornadoes, which, it already has a 70% base CC chance, right? And what happens is in tier 2, and I've brought this up before, is that a lot of the tier 2 stuff is going to increase hit chance, it's going to increase collision chance, and all of that, right? And so basically, when I was looking at all the hit chance and collision chance that people were going to be building, I mean, people are going to have well over, 900, 1,000 collision chance. And so with that, right, that's why I went over to this calculator to determine, okay, which one or how much collision resistance do I actually need, right? And realistically, right, you can get away with 1,000 collision resistance, which I think will serve you really well. But if you want to really make sure that you're not going to take as much CC, I would really go for the 1200. If you want to get all nerdy with all of this stuff, you can. But basically, for this one, I'm just going to give you guys just the lowdown of there's going to be all that collision chance, and people will be building 1,100 even collision chance. And so if you can get 1,200 CC resistance, then you'll have a much lower chance of getting hit. As you can see here, say if someone had, 500. So yeah, if they had, I think the graph shows 500 500 hit chance, then basically like our resistance needs to be a certain threshold as well. And so guys, I'm sure that didn't make any sense at all, but I would just trust me on the fact that I think 1,200 is going to be kind of our number. And this is, again, based on looking at all of the different collision chance that people are going to be building. So just go for the 1,200 if possible. Again, if you can only hit like 1,900, that's going to be really good. But 1,200 is probably going to be your sweet spot, in my opinion. And so that's what I go for. And fortunately, we're able to hit it in this build. With that, skill damage resistance, guys, skill damage resistance is absolutely huge. Get this as high as you can because this is raw damage resistance. It decreases damage from skills for every 10 points. It decreases by 1%. So the higher you get this, the more it'll serve you. And skill damage resistance is just so good. As people are getting so much more damage, this will mitigate it a lot more. Plus, we have critical hit damage reduction, 28%, which I think is really solid, to be honest. Yeah, you could get this higher for sure, but I think anything above 25% damage or crit damage reduction is just huge. With that, right, because we're building a lot of crit damage reduction, again, we're going for endurance. So this is where I get my triple endurance, guys. And so, again, endurance causes us to evade those critical hits. And so basically, we want to get this as high as possible. So, guys, again, with those critical hit chance and things like that, people are going to be building a lot, okay? And so basically, my rule of thumb that I was trying to aim for was I was trying to get, as a triple coverage healer, I wanted to get at least 2K in each category because there's going to be so much critical hit chance coming in, guys. So I would try to go for 2K. Now, if you're not feeling like, hey, I don't really need magic resist or magic endurance, definitely beef up your range and melee endurance then. You want these as high as possible. I would say you'd be okay if you were going to hit like 2,300 in each of these and then leaving this at like 1,600 or whatever. So I would, or 22, yeah, about 2,300 in each. That would be pretty solid if you're trying to defend against those, but you'll be very vulnerable to magic. And so I don't want you guys to get one shot by a fireball. So basically that's when I'm going to be going my triple endurance guys, because it covers all three pretty effectively. Is it going to cover one amazingly over the other? No, because they're around all the same. Now, I will say, though, going into the defenses, which is that raw damage mitigation, which is just awesome, or damage defense, which is just great. Basically, because of the gear pieces that we have, my melee defense and my range are going to be a little bit higher than my magic, but which is totally fine because this will just help us in the long run, too. And again, all of these numbers synergize super well together. We have all the skill damage resistance, critical hit, plus the endurances and defense. They all synergize really well together. Plus, we have our passives from our skills, too, that give us even more damage, or excuse me, more endurance. And so I think building endurance is just going to be the way to go for a bow wand healer. Finally, I put in stun resistance here. 500. That's, I mean, it's honestly not going to be that great, but something's better than nothing, right? And then I also put range in here too, just to see how effectively we can heal people, which almost 25 meters is pretty solid. So, which is awesome. Excuse me, which is awesome. And which is about 37% here. Okay, guys, that was a lot of information, but that's what we're going to land on with our stats. Again, the skills, I have these listed here. I got rid of the masteries so that we don't inflate these numbers as much. And then also the artifacts, guys. So I'm going to briefly talk about this because, again, I don't know artifacts super well, but I've been kind of just looking at the different set effects and things like that. And realistically, I just went for the Ancient King's Armor because we get 1,500 max health. And then the Greedy Mind's Eye, I went for the 4-piece set effect here. Yes, you could go for the 6-piece to get skill damage resistance, but I do like a little extra health, which is nice. Plus, we get endurance in all of our categories and our CC resistances in all categories too. You guys can go into each individual one here. Basically, I'm always looking at increasing my healing, so heavy attack, crit chance, magic heavy attack. Basically, just want to increase my healing. And then endurances for all my other ones too, if possible. And then also collision resistance, stun resistance. And also too, if you guys look at the passive, it says Scheming Gaze. If affected by bind, collision, petrification, blah, 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 then the user's skill damage resistance increases by 70 for 5 seconds and stacks up to 3 times. So we're just going to get even more resistance, which is awesome. That's why I went for the Greedy Mind, which is really nice. And then more endurances here. And then I gave us a little bit of skill heal just because the other ones weren't as good in my opinion. And then collision resistance too. And then finally this one, the Immortal Wraith Armor passive here, max health increases by 5,000 for 10 seconds. Health also increases. So basically for this one, guys, we just get more healing or more health, which is just awesome. I mean, if we got another 5K, then we're at like, 33,000. When that procs. And so again, do I know how these work? Not fully, because I've never been exposed to these yet, but it sounded really good, so I decided to put it in there. And that's kind of what I came up with. So hopefully that kind of made sense, and you'll be able to see all of the different resistances we get, which synergize really well with what we're building. Finally, the mastery. This is from my video that I did. So if you guys want to check this out, go check out that video on why I did these masteries with all these passives. But essentially, I'll just do a quick showcase of that real quick. And yeah, so it's the longbow wand. So there you go. Okay, now finally, moving into the last segment here, I'm going to just talk about the no field boss in my end game. So guys, this is my end game with no arc boss, right? So essentially, this is going to be the build I'm going for. And the reason why is because, great, if I can get these pieces, even better. But this is the one that I think is a little bit more realistic and one that we'll all be able to get versus getting like the Cordy wand, and things like that, which gives us all this more extra cooldown and stuff. But I'm going to be going for this one, and really what changes is the accessories. So if I just quick look back and forth, you'll see that the accessories change a little bit. I did keep the Black Anvil, even though it's a field boss. I still think it's possible, right? Because you guys were able to get field bosses from tier 1, so you'll definitely be able to get them eventually in tier 2. It's just going to take a little bit longer. And same with the necklace as well. So basically, I just switch out some of the rings here and the belt. So the Paladin's ring, this comes from a dungeon. Awesome. Endurance, strength, wisdom, hit chance, and then we get all these resistances too. And again, for the ring, which is, let's see, the Paladin's ring. Yeah, it's in a dungeon, which is just great. And then finally, the Cunning Ogre belt. We get heavy attack evasion, which is just nice. I mean, I don't build into this, so it's not going to be super effective, but I get the strength, wisdom, and melee defense, which is just really nice. And then all these other resistances too. Skill damage resistance, collision, great, and yeah, all that too. So with that, again, with the Cunning Ogre belt, that one is down here. It's in a dungeon, completely farmable. And so basically the most challenging ones are going to be these two, the Black Anvil and the Moon Shadow. The Immortal Bracers should be pretty, well, it's on Nebula Island, so it's going to be challenging, but not as daunting as trying to go for the Black Anvil, which comes from a field boss, and then also the Moon Necklace, which comes from Nebula Island and a field boss. So if you look at our stats here, what really increases, and I'll do a comparison here in a second, but what's really nice is I get a little bit more max health, sacrificing some max mana there. But really what changes here is the cooldown speed, and then also I think I get more collision resistance from the previous one too, or excuse me, skill damage resistance. But realistically, if you guys are looking at this, I keep my 2k range endurance, which is awesome. I get that 28% damage, critical hit damage reduction, and then all my defenses stay around the 3k mark, which is nice. Yes, they're a little bit less because these do not have all of the cool whale pieces, but they're definitely more possible to get, and I still end up with around the same numbers, which I think is just solid overall. And then finally, I'll just show you guys, if you had no field boss and no arc boss, this is kind of the stat spread that you'd end up with. Basically switched out for the Frosty Deadman's necklace, the Manor Sunset ring, and we keep these two same. Immortal Bracers, again, it's on Nebula Island, but it's not in it's not a field boss or an arc boss. That's why I kept it. And so basically, if we look at the stats here, again, doesn't really decrease overall. We could drop some mana if we wanted more health. And then also we maintain a lot. The cooldown's going to go down a little bit, but the buff duration stays above 60. Debuff stays at 30. We still get 1200 collision resistance. Still maintain our 2000 threshold with the endurances. And we keep around 3k for our defenses as well. Our skill damage resistance definitely goes down a lot if you don't have any of these cool pieces, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So essentially what I can do is I'm going to compare the build real quick. So I'm going to basically compare, so let's see here if I can do the, what is this? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is the, oh wow. Okay, so this is like the first one we talked about, and then this is the no field boss. Essentially what I want to do is I'm going to change this real quick to the let's see, triple coverage. So we'll go here, and then yeah, okay, so this is the original one we were talking about. So guys, if we're just looking at a quick stat breakdown, so this side over here, this is if you got everything minus the Cordy, with all those stats that we were talking about. And this is everything without any of the arc boss or the field boss items as well. And so basically, if you go down here, you can kind of take a look at, okay, which one's better. Obviously, this one's going to be better because it has all those different things. But realistically, like, the stats are going to be very similar as best as we can. We lose a lot of that skill damage resistance, decrease a lot of our endurances and things like that going into this side here. But realistically, we're looking at similar stats, which is really cool. Now, I just want to show this is the one that I'm actually going to be going for, this set right here. And then we do a comparison on this side too. We get a little bit more. You can see I can kind of switch out my max health for max mana as much as I want. But realistically, I'm only missing out on a couple percentage from skill heal. Get even more buff on this side too, but I maintain that collision resistance almost to a T. Gain a lot more skill damage resistance on this side. But I actually get a little bit more endurance going on this side as well too. However, I sacrifice, with that defense on this side as well. So basically just note that as we're going into this too. So you guys can do a comparison, which is really cool to kind of see all these different stats. But again, guys, that'll wrap up this video. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. I want to know your guys' thoughts on this. If you guys think this is a pretty solid build, if you don't think it's a good build, let me know in the comments as to what you're going to be going for and why you think that, I should be building something better. But yeah, we're all learning this together, guys. Thank you guys so much for the support. Really appreciate everything you guys have been sharing in the comments. I really do try to read all of them and things like that. And so basically, really appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next one.